Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Hey, welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where strategic planning is like the final round of a festive scavenger hunt. Exciting, competitive, and full of surprises. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. Out B2B SaaS founders like you scale from 7 figures, which is good, to 8 figures and a premium exit, which is pretty freaking awesome. Together, we supercharge revenue growth, create premium valuation, and craft the business you're proud of and a life of impact and freedom that you love. Well, I hope you enjoyed a great Thanksgiving holiday and deepened some relationships. We're definitely in the home stretch of the year, December, the final act of this year's grand performance. And every leader I know has been working hard, driving, selling, building, just grinding. And now at the end of the year is in sight. I'll bet some of you are thinking about how you can make a big final push. And others are like, yeah, it's finally here and what's done is done. We can just coast into the holidays, get ready and be ready for January. And I used to bounce between those two until one of my mentors showed me something that completely changed my business. And it was one of the key things that allowed me to go from 8 to 9 figures for the first time and crack that big $100 million mark for the first time. I'll pass that on here and even walk you through step by step what that looks like. It's really easy to grind away and miss out on all the holidays have to offer, especially connection and family time. And it's also easy to get lost in the holiday sparkle and coast along. Nothing happens in December, right? Well, of course it does. But remember this, what you do now sets the stage for your Q1. Next year doesn't start in January, it starts now. It's kind of weird to say that, but it's true. And a time when smart moves can really give you a giant head start, while others are, coming back from the first of the year kind of nursing their hangovers. Now I look at December like it's the last few miles of a marathon. I mean, you're tired, yes, but this is where the race is won, where the leaders break away from the pack. It's not about sprinting, it's about steady, strategic strides. Every effort, every plan you put into motion now is an investment into next year's triumphs. That doesn't mean we're going to join time off with family and friends. We definitely are going to do that. We'll do both in a really smart way. And here's the game plan. Number one, we want to maintain momentum. So while others seem to slow down, keeping your pace steady ensures that you hit the ground running in January. It's not a sprint. Think of it as keeping a steady rhythm, just ensuring that you're not starting from zero when the new year rings in. Use this time to strategically set up huge wins in Q1 and well beyond, because what you do now will do that for you. 2, cultivate connections. The holidays offer a unique opportunity to strengthen relationships in a more relaxed and personal setting. So reach out, spread some cheer, let your clients and prospects know that they're more than a number. It's these personal touches that often lead to fruitful collaborations and deals in the new year. And it's even better to do this all the time, but start now. And number 3 is strategic reflection and planning. Utilize this time to reflect back and plan forward. Analyze the year's past successes and shortcomings. Lay down a tactical blueprint for the upcoming year so that when the holiday dust settles, you're already a step ahead. Most competitors will just start this maybe mid-January, so plan now and be ready to execute day one. And the best part is because you've diligently laid your groundwork, you can truly enjoy holiday downtime, knowing that you set the wheels in motion for a successful new year. So let's make December count, not just as an end, but as a powerful launch pad into a triumphant new year. Our expert guest last week was John Barrows, the driving force behind JB Sales. He brought real-time expertise of SaaS sales, not just teaching, but actively selling, personally prospecting, and managing deals, all in this environment. So if you need a sales boost, this is the ticket. And our founder last week was Adam White, who has built and sold over 20 internet and SaaS businesses. We talked about building companies that others see as valuable. So if you missed either of those episodes, go back and give them a listen. My guest today is Andrew Swiler, CEO of Lanteria and strategic maestro in the HR tech world. Andrew is transforming HRMS with his visionary leadership and innovating employee engagement solutions. He's an operational whiz and trendsetter, propelling Lanteria to the forefront of HR tech with his knack for smart investments and game-changing strategies. welcome Andrew Swiler. Hey, Andrew, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Thank you, Jeff. It's awesome to be here. I'm really excited to meet you and really excited to talk to you today.
Well, really excited about talking with you as well. You've got a really unique background. You started in private equity, the dark side, and then moved over and became a founder. And here we are. I'd love to hear about that journey and what you're doing today with Lanteria.
So, full disclosure, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. Like, I think even my I don't know how many generations back, but my family came over from Lithuania, and my great grandfather ended up stopping in this like lumber town in Wisconsin and opening like a general store. And that general store turned into a clothing store. And even my grandfather still ran that clothing store until I was a little kid. And then my dad like owned retail stores and had his own company. He never liked employees. My dad basically never had employees, but he was an entrepreneur his whole life, built a lot of different companies. So I had that experience in me. But, when I went to college, my dad was like, go get a finance degree. And then you don't have to be an entrepreneur and you can make good money and not have to do all this dumb stuff that I did most of my life. And I was like, all right. So I did that. I went into private equity after college. We worked in more like distressed private equity. So we'd buy companies out of bankruptcy, restructure them. And like our most famous deal was probably like Polaroid. Like we bought Polaroid, the brand, and restructured that. So I got super burned out after like 5 years. And decided to just go travel. Told my boss one day, like, I'm going to go travel and write. That's what I told him. I was going to write in Europe for a while. And he was like, oh my God, like you got to get out of here. Like, you're totally burned out. So I ended up meeting my wife, my now wife, on a kayaking trip in Croatia. And we traveled together for about a month. And I convinced her after that to move to San Francisco. I knew I didn't want to go back to private equity. I knew that chapter of my life was done. But I wanted to get into tech. It was like Airbnb was getting started. I was using Airbnb, Facebook, like all this excitement was going on. And I was like, let's go out to San Francisco. So we moved out there for 2 years. I worked as like a fractional CFO for a couple of small SaaS companies to help them raise money, basically. And one day my wife said to me, I don't like living here and I'm going to move back to Barcelona, where she's from. And you can come with, or you can stay here. And we now live in Barcelona 10 years later. But when we moved here, I didn't speak the language. I didn't know what to do. And my wife was actually starting an e-commerce company, an eyewear company. And she asked me, like, I don't know how to raise money and we need money. So I ended up stepping in. I said, I'll help you raise money and kind of set up some structures. And it was going to be like a 3 or 4 month project. And 6 years later, we ended up selling the company. To after we'd grown, like we grew franchises and we kind of grew to relatively large, sold the company, and the pandemic hit right afterwards. And I was like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, what do I want to do? I worked a little bit for a venture capital firm, worked a little bit for a family office, but I knew about this thing called search funds, where basically like an entrepreneur kind of goes out and acquires a company. I didn't like search funds personally because I thought they didn't have enough risk in them. Like as an entrepreneur, I think too often it's like, well, pay me $200,000 to go look for a business. Like, well, just go do it. You don't need to get paid to do that. Right. It's a fun activity. So I spent probably a year and a half just reading things called confidential information memorandums. So like when a company's for sale, they send you like this document that tells you all about the company. Right. I read probably 2,000 of these things, from e-commerce companies to SaaS companies to HVAC companies, everything. And just kind of learned about like the industry, like deal terms, how to structure a deal. So when Lanteria came around, the two previous owners were, they're from Ukraine. They were entrepreneurs from Ukraine. And obviously the Ukrainian war was a difficult situation. They needed to sell the company. And I saw just an outlier situation. I said, this is a company that we can get debt for. It was profitable. This was an easy company to pitch investors on, because I'm in Barcelona. Like prior to the pandemic, if I called an investor, they would be like, why would I even talk to you? Like, what are you doing in Barcelona? Why don't you move to San Francisco? What's going on? And after the pandemic, it was just like you and me. It was like two guys on a screen talking to each other. They didn't care where I was or what I was doing. So the pandemic totally changed everything for me, like my trajectory, my ability to raise money, to do things that were different. And we acquired the company. It was frankly, it was pretty easy to get the debt financing was tough. We had to convince a bank to give us $1 million. And then we had to convince some investors, but the investors, like the guys from Tiny Seed Capital that end up investing in us, I talked to them for maybe 20 minutes on the phone. The pitch was maybe 20 minutes. And they said, I get it. Send over the due diligence package, but count us in. And yeah, we were off to the races, and it's been exciting. It's not easy. I mean, we still have a lot of people in Ukraine, a lot of difficult situations. You got to pay debt. It's tough.
That is a fascinating story. Is all the twists and turns. I mean, that's what entrepreneurship is. I think a lot of times, is just all the twists and turns, and it's an adventure.
Yeah, I always say to people, I actually made a video of this today, that there's really like two things that could make you that I think an entrepreneur needs. Like there's two skill sets. Like obviously there's certain market things, but the resilience, just like that you can put up with a lot of crap and just keep kind of plowing through it and being like, okay, I made a mistake here. I'm going to keep going. Somebody doesn't like this. I don't care. I'm going to keep going. And just curiosity, like to say, like, now I work in HR. I don't know anything about HR. I've never worked for a large company. I've never had an HR department even talk to me outside of, I got into HR. I knew this was a good business. And I just decided I'm going to call our clients and I'm going to talk to them. And I started a podcast too with potential clients where I would just say like, hey, come on my podcast and explain, like, what do you do? What's important to you? What are you good at? And for me, like, I just like it. I like hearing about it. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Like you meet interesting people that do interesting things. And if you're curious, you can become an entrepreneur.
Yes. Well, I think it's fascinating that you looked at so many different companies. I mean, 2,000 confidential memorandums and looking at the different companies to identify the one opportunity. And, I think, having that experience in the past certainly served you well. What is it that is an important quality or skill, or, as you're looking at companies, how do you know what to choose? What is it that you're finding? If somebody's out there looking at deals, what is it that is going to make that a successful venture?
So, I mean, the difference between like starting from zero, you want to know that you have like a specific skill set or a specific understanding of a market. You want to make sure that there's this big market in front of you. When you're looking at an acquisition, I mean, a lot of times what you're looking at also is what's the downside risk here? Because, you're going to outlay, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million bucks. You want to know what's the downside risk here. And typically in acquisitions, the downside is limited and the upside is a little bit more limited as well. I mean, you're not talking about these like 100x situations. You're looking for, the 5, 6, 7x exit is a good exit in private equity. So you're already from like a venture capital perspective, you're kind of in a different ball game of, risk return and what you're trying to do. I mean, in venture capital, it's just all risk. It's like, it's, 3 guys or 2 guys, and we're just going to throw some money at them and see what kind of comes out of it. In this case, you're looking at it from a different perspective, especially like what's the multiplier? If we, execute well, can we expand the multiple? So, if I acquire it at 2x revenue, if I grow it at this, am I going to be able to get out at 4x, 5x, 6x, 10x revenue? Because that's where like the real unlock can happen is sort of getting that multiple expansion that people want to get to. And then the other key parts is, you're looking at financials. Obviously, it's nice that you have historicals on a lot of these companies. So you can see you can look at cohorts, you can look at churn. The one strange thing that I do compared to other people I've talked to, like you can read a bunch of websites and read sort of like the basics and blocking and tackling. I would say the one insight I would give people is go on G2, go on Open, on Glassdoor. Look at these places where people are reviewing the employees, the customers. What is this company about? Because you also need to know, like, what are you getting into? If you're getting into a company that's just like a rocket ship, the company's growing and everything's kind of a well-oiled machine, you're going to pay a premium for that. But sometimes you'll see companies where they're growing, like the revenue's growing, the cohorts are growing, but behind the scenes, it's just a dumpster fire. The employees aren't happy. Everyone wants to leave. The customers want to churn. They're just on like an annual thing, or something just changed in the product and they don't like it. And if you go and read reviews, especially like recent ones, you can see what's the journey that this company's on. And then you'll know, am I getting on this rocket ship or am I taking a potential, fixer-upper or a turnaround, which is kind of what we look for. And I think that's like one of the few areas that, beyond just the financial numbers and sort of the top line and bottom line, that you can see some hints as to like how the company works, how the employees look at it, how the customers look at it, because that's the foundation of what you're buying usually in these companies.
That makes a lot of sense, and really understanding and seeing the trend, because you could see reviews from 2 years ago, maybe they're great and they just start trending downward or maybe upward, or there were issues that were solved.
Yeah. And that might be why they're selling.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're selling for that reason. They did something wrong. They know it. And I mean, even with Lanteria, when we first looked at it, I looked at it a year before we had bought it. They had really good numbers from 2020, but they had like a spike from a couple big customers that did some big contracts with them. And those went away. And you could see it going away. And when they came back to us a year later, we were like, well, we're not going to buy it for what you wanted it for 12 months ago. Like, we're going to buy it for what it is now. And that's the typical thing. I mean, in SaaS, like if the revenue is going up, the enterprise value is going up. But once the revenue goes flat, the enterprise value just collapses underneath.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point too, and really looking at multiples. I mean, so often I think entrepreneurs are really looking at that top line number, and it's all about growing revenue, and they forget, or maybe don't know, that the other way to really increase that is the multiple.
Yeah,
those change, and there are things that you can do to affect the multiple both ways.
Yeah,
it could be customer concentration. It could be you're really involved in the business. It could be, there's so many different factors. And how does that play into, when you're looking at acquiring a company or looking to go to market, how do you think about that?
So I was actually, if you want the best multiple, I was with one of my friends the other day. He sold his company he sold his company last year, and he got a great multiple. I don't know the number. I just know it was a good exit. And he was like, the key to my success in this acquisition is I did not care. Like, I did not care if they bought the company. I didn't care if I kept running the company. He's like, the company was running well. I had built a system where he was like, I was skiing already more than I was working. And he was like, I had built a system. He's like, I built a machine and the machine worked and I wasn't involved. And the rest of my team was motivated. They had, skin in the game and they were working well. And so when they came to us for this acquisition, he was like, they would send me like due diligence, like question lists. And he's like, I would just hit no and drag it to the bottom on the Excel. And I would send it back to him. And I would say, if you want to buy the company, but I'm not answering this crap. Like, I don't want to deal with it. And so that is true. Like, if you don't care, if it's like, hey, company's running well, I don't care if I sell it. I don't care if you buy it or not. That's when the biggest multiple expansion, because then it's like, you just name your price. And it's like, if they want it, they get it. If not, you just don't want to be a forced seller. So when I'm buying, I look at kind of special situations. I don't want to buy the 10x multiple. ARR is growing super fast. For me, it's just not a market that I understand very well. It's not something that myself or the investors I know have an appetite in for where we're at. I prefer special situations, companies that need to be turned around. Companies, what I'm actively looking at right now are companies that overcapitalized themselves, put themselves in a position where the founders maybe have, some big liquidation preferences for the VCs. The VCs are looking at this like, I don't even want to be, why am I at this board meeting? I don't care. This company's not going anywhere. It's just a speck inside of our portfolio. And the founders like, I can't get anything out of this. Like, even if we sold for 10x what we're doing right now, I would get zero. And those are the kinds of situations that we're looking at to step into, to, find a way to get everyone sort of the exit that cleans everything up. You get rid of that extra froth that's been built on top that, a lot of times the KPIs you need to hit is like, how many account executives did you hire this quarter? And that's just a horrible KPI. Like, that's not like a good business KPI. That's just a KPI that says, hey, if we hire this many, in theory, then we're going to grow X amount over the next 2 years. But it doesn't always work out that way. And when it doesn't work out, then it's hard to cut back. Then there's cash issues. But sometimes there's good underlying businesses here. There are businesses with good customer reviews. The customers like it. The customers are staying on. And there's unit economics that could work, if you step in and structure the business in the right way. So I look at things like that where, you might be able to find the incentives are aligned where everyone just wants to get out and dump this off to someone else that's willing to operate in a different way, because I don't want to have 100 account executives. I want to have 5 and have them be running at, optimal speed. And that's the kind of stuff that we look for. I know people that do these sort of like big, high growth, but I think a lot of times those go to more strategic buyers. I don't think they go to sort of financial investors like us. And I respect it. I mean, I have a good friend that sold his business another good friend that sold his business to a strategic and did fantastic. And the negotiation was very easy because they were growing like crazy, and it was the perfect sort of strategic fit.
Yeah, really looking for the strategic fit. That's where magic happens. And there are a lot of companies out there, and I think it's kind of sad, just the VC model and taking the projections and the high growth and forecasting that to infinity, and then it doesn't happen. And now you have a business that could have been really, really good and is struggling because the projections were so ridiculous. I think a lot of that happened, 2020, 21.
Yeah.
And maybe things are coming back down to earth, but how does that affect raising? Capital raise, is that something that you've seen as a challenge, whether it's in buying companies or they're selling because they can't raise?
So on the selling side, I mean, what I've noticed at least is most venture capital firms are not willing to write these things down to the level that they're at. I don't know what the reasoning is, but there seems to be very little incentive for these people to write this off and just say like, hey, let's get rid of this. Let's get it off our books. Let's get it off the reporting and move on. I don't know what it is. Unless there's debt, this usually isn't happening. Once there's debt and there's covenants and things like that, then they're like, everyone wants to like wash their hands and move on as quick as possible because they're worried they're gonna end up in court. But those are the only situations. And frankly, I'm surprised because I do see a lot. I've been approached by quite a few that have raised Series A. They can't raise their Series B. They haven't hit the numbers, these certain KPIs. And when you say to them like, well, this company's gonna be gone in 6 months. Like, okay, we'll take it on, but what do you expect from us from like a purchasing? Because this is just going to disappear. Like, you're not even going through the process. Yeah, it's going to zero because they can't even do the process of getting it profitable. Because like I said, the incentive of like the entrepreneur is like, well, even if I make this profitable and we get it moving in a certain direction, what are we going to do with this? Like I've got these guys on here with these liquidation preferences, and they have no incentive to liquidate it or to do anything. So it's this weird dynamic that where companies, even their IP kind of goes to zero. Like everything just kind of disappears. But there were good companies with good IP under them, and it just gets burned out. And it's one of those weird things in the tech industry that I haven't understood. Like when I worked in retail or in PE, like there was always something you could scratch out of there. Like there was always one last puff of the cigarette that you could take out of there. And in software, I find that people, it's just like, no, we're just going to let it die and move on, which is frankly surprising. It's like either we get the unicorn 100x, we get like a decent exit, or just let it disappear into the ether. And I would like to figure out a way. I mean, this is what I'm kind of working on is trying to build up these relationships, figure out ways to get it done. And I know a handful of people that are doing this successfully. And I haven't figured out the secret sauce yet, but that's what I'm kind of in the process of right now. And especially I'm just focused on like HR as a specific sector. And for me, that focus is because I think if we are focused, we'll be able to tell a story to these VCs or to these founders and say, hey, like this is a good place for you guys to land this, and let's figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Lanteria. I think you've built a really nice business, and with vertical SaaS for sure. I mean, in HR, but then you've specialized even further, which I love, and specifically working with Microsoft.
So I can't take credit for it. That was the previous owner. So this company was started as a SharePoint shop, basically. Like they were doing custom builds for companies like intranets and things. And they found this niche of HR, like basically like an HR skin on top of SharePoint. And then they kept building it and going deeper and turn it into like a pretty robust product. I mean, our one of our best sales guys in Australia says it's Ferrari for the price of a Fiat. That's his way of kind of pitching it. It's it's an affordable, very robust product that is comparable in features to Workday, but you're paying a fraction of the price for what SuccessFactors or Workday would cost. So it's a good business. I love the Microsoft niche. I think Microsoft has the last count was it's doubled since 2020, the user base for Office 365. Yeah. When we first were like doing due diligence on it and we would go out to talk to investors, they were like, Microsoft, like what? Like, why would you want to get into Microsoft? And now when we talk to people, we're like, oh, Microsoft, interesting. It's amazing. Like, I don't know if it's the AI part or what, but all of a sudden in 3 years, they've gone to the other end of the spectrum. Now people are like, oh, yes, interesting. And so we're leaning even further into it. Like the previous owners, they had built it with SharePoint and leaned into SharePoint, but we're focused on building it for like the whole Office 365 suite. So we're like focused a lot on Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, OneDrive, SharePoint Online, making sure this is just a product that it can work for non-Microsoft users. Like that's our objective, but we want to make sure it's the best experience for Microsoft users because that's where our current customer base is. And I think we're in such a competitive market that trying to go out there fighting these, guys with bazookas of money like HiBob and Bamboo right. HR, like it's better to say, hey, we're the best for Microsoft users. And if you got Microsoft, come talk to us.
And that's good. And you've had success in cross-selling and really partnering with Microsoft as well, where they're promoting and they really see the value in having a solution like you have along with their tools.
Yeah. Yeah, Microsoft is actually really an underrated sort of channel partner for a lot of their partners. Like if you have a good product, they'll demo your product to customers to show them how great Office 365 is or how great Microsoft Teams is. They're like, oh, look at this app, Lanteria, that integrates. And as long as it kind of like looks like this native experience, they do it. There's not a competitor, sort of a complementary LMS product called LMS 365. And they're doing 20 million ARR. And up until recently, they were basically on-prem SharePoint, the LMS. And now they've moved to cloud. But I mean, they've been huge. And it's just a niche inside of a niche inside of Microsoft that sits inside of Microsoft Teams, and the people love it.
You want to plan together with fellow B2B SaaS founders? And check out today's sponsor, Champion Leadership Group. It's the ultimate resource for SaaS founders and C-suite executives like you to continue to develop themselves, scale their companies, and never walk alone on the journey. We do strategic planning with clients every December, and this year we're opening that up to what is normally a clients-only process, inviting you too. Together, we plan the entire year in just a few hours. And as I said earlier, this was a real game changer for me when I first learned this. We call it the preloaded year. We do the thinking and planning now, enjoy time off, and maintain our momentum right into the new year so you can fly by competitors. It's free for you since you're listening or watching the podcast. You can learn more about that and how we help SaaS founders build amazing companies and premium exits, if that's what they want. Join us and see what we're all about. Start the new year like you've never have before. For more info, check out championleadership.com. I think it's brilliant. And it's where I think a lot of companies get partnership wrong. They'll try and do it. And working with big companies, and you think about a company like Microsoft, just massive, and how could you get them to sell your stuff? Well, they don't want to sell your stuff. They want to sell more of their stuff. But when your stuff helps them sell more of their stuff, they're all about that. And so I think it's really, really smart how you've positioned the company and continue, I mean, the guys before, and then you continue that on, really deepen that partnership and adding value to what they're doing so they can sell more of their stuff.
Yeah. And the Microsoft niche, it's not easy. Like this is not, you're not running freemium models here. You're not getting the type of customer where they're like, they saw an ad and they come in, they're going to try out your software. This is heavy compliance, a lot of security questions, SOC 2. You need to go through a lot of hoops. I mean, you're running demos to the HR manager, demos to the VP, demos to the IT department. And it's not an easy sale, but it's a sticky sale. Once you get in, people, they stick around for a long time. they stay happy. The implementation, there's implementation factors, but people are locked in and they like it. They like the product. They're not leaving Microsoft. I mean, nobody ever leaves Microsoft because there's nowhere else to go. So you have the people locked in, and it's an interesting niche that it's not sexy at all. I mean, HR and Microsoft, it doesn't get less sexy in software probably at this point.
Yeah. Well, profitability and growth, I'll take that over sexy any day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you don't have to fight. For me, the key is just in marketing and sales. Like if you get into these big markets where you're dealing with Workday that's got like Super Bowl ads, or Hi Bob and Bamboo that are running, LinkedIn ads constantly, you're going in with just a pocket knife, and you got to figure out like how you're going to slice and dice. And the only way is just having like the deepest niche possible. And we even go deep, like our ICPs we dive into like industries that we work a lot in: manufacturing, banks, financial institutions, aeronautics companies, conglomerates is kind of like a weird thing. Like if you have a bunch of companies in a bunch of different countries, we have a really interesting offering because we're one of the few products that you don't have to sign up or have a different product in each country. You could have ours and be running all those offices under one roof, which very few other softwares are offering that. Usually you'd have to have like a different siloed product. You can have the same Hi Bob product, but it would be different in Europe. It would be different in the US. It would be different in India. And that helps us.
I think it's really smart, finding a niche inside of a niche inside of a niche. And then you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And you found ways to compete where your competitors either aren't or don't serve the market well. So there are gaps in there that you can solve. I think that's really, really smart and being able to grow a company.
Yeah, no, especially Microsoft is a big gap. People overlook building into like the app source. They view there's a lot of Slack integrations. There's a lot of things for Salesforce, a lot of things for Google, and it just kind of gets overlooked. I mean, people make fun of Microsoft Teams a lot.
Yeah, they are definitely, even still, 800-pound gorilla in the space. There was a time where I thought that, maybe their time was done, and they have made a huge resurgence in the last few years and really embraced the SaaS model and some pretty innovative things. Copilot. That's been a real game changer. Is that something that you've integrated into Lanteria as well?
We're working on it. I mean, it's so new, like even the access for developers is so new. So we're looking at ways, also with HR, the way we view HR is it's the perfect type of environment where people want to be working just with, basic language. They don't want to be looking at graphs, trying to pull things here and there. So what we're trying to do is inside of like Microsoft Teams, for example, where you'll be using Copilot, you'll be able to talk to, our product, ask it to pull up this graph, pull up this information about this employee, give me this information, and be able to sort of visualize it inside of Microsoft. That's our vision for it. But we have very little access to like what Copilot can actually do and what it will be able to do in the future. I think they're still kind of guarding a lot of that inside, or letting, partners that bring them a lot more revenue have more access to it. Yeah. But I'm hoping that we get to soon, because that's one of the things that we're super excited about.
Very cool. Yeah, I can definitely see how that would benefit in a solution like that.
Absolutely.
Well, growing a company is always challenging, and failure is one of those things that sometimes is seen as a taboo topic. But we all have those, and we all have the ups and downs. No journey is always up and to the right, no matter what you read in the magazine. So what has it been like in building the company? Have you experienced setbacks, and then how have you bounced back from those?
I think for me, one of the most challenging things, like I said, this is kind of a turnaround. We had a strange situation where we have most of the employees when we took over had been with the company 8+ years. Like almost all the employees had been there for 8+ years, which as you know, in software is like 80 years. It's like in dog years when software.
Yeah.
So we had this weird thing where there was already kind of a close built community of people. We stepped in. There was definitely some standoffish behavior, a lot of questioning decisions we were making. when a company's been working for so long and providing for these employees for so long, they're wondering why do you want to change it? And you have to explain to them that if a software company is flat in sales, eventually it's going to die. Like you churn a couple of those big customers and you're not adding new ones, that's going to kill you. So we had to kind of get people to adjust there, and we're still having difficulties there. And then I think the challenge that any founders deal with is when you get to certain levels of a company, the people that got you there aren't the people that are going to get you to that next phase.
Yeah, exactly right.
And the owners seem to have optimized more for comfort than for dealing with that difficulty. There was very little firing, very little turnover. So there were certain people that had gotten them there that they had not turned over. And it was pretty clear to us that some of those people needed to, step out of the way or be moved into other roles. And that's always one of the biggest challenges. Like I have a lot of friends that have started companies, and the biggest challenge is when, the original CMO or the original CTO or the original, head of engineering that really was just a person that oversaw like 2 people. All of a sudden you need 5 people, and they don't really know how to manage that. They don't know how to set goals. They don't know how to delegate. And you try and we've tried to coach some people, but a lot of people we've had to let go and make those difficult decisions. And, the first couple are hard because you're really worried, like, what is the rest of the team going to think about this? When I usually, what I do if we fired someone is, make a Loom video, send it out to our all hands group, because we're fully remote. Because you don't want them just like disappear into the ether. You want to tell people like, hey, we made this decision for this reason. And sometimes it's just budget. It's like, hey, we're on a cash crunch right now and we need to let go of some people. And this person was too expensive. So try and be open with people. That's probably one of the hardest parts. And then just for me, I did something called Leadership Circle. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's like a 360 review, essentially, where like investors, partners, employees, peers give you this review. Like it's like a 50 question quiz. And then they give you this circle that kind of shows you like your positioning inside of leadership. And the part on the bottom is your reactionary part. And the part on top is the proactive part, the good part. You're supposed to be, creative, proactive. And then the part on the bottom is sort of like the reactionary, like the difficult things that you do poorly. But you need to have a balance. You also want to have some of that reactionary part. And my issue was I had a lot of people pleasing. I wasn't very good at confrontation. I wasn't very authoritarian because I don't like being dictated to. So therefore, I don't like to dictate. I like to give people goals. I like to work with them collaboratively, but I don't like to say, hey, you need to hit this and you need to do it next month, or you're going to be fired, or you're going to get demoted or whatever. Because if someone did that to me, I'd be like, screw this guy, I'm out of here. Like I don't need to deal with this. Right. So I've been dealing with a lot of that's just in leadership. Like once you hit a certain level as a company, it's not about your sales and marketing knowledge, or it's not about your ability to code. It's about your ability to lead and your ability to sort of deal with difficult challenges. And so that's been part of my biggest journey, is just like learning that. I mean, the biggest mistake we made by far is we just didn't raise enough money at the beginning. Like if I could point out, like, what was our biggest mistake? There was money that we left on the table because we thought we'll buy the company, we'll kind of rearrange it, reorganize it, and then we'll go back out to the market with like a new plan and a better multiple, or a better valuation, let's say, sure, and a growth plan. And the market tanked. We made a mistake, and we should have just taken the cash at the time and had a big cushion of cash and been able to operate correctly. And that's been one of their biggest hamstrings so far, is just we had to move like into full bootstrapping mode and just trying to get as much revenue out of customers as possible to reinvest it into the business. And that's cost us some time for sure.
Yeah, it definitely cost time. But if the plan had worked out, then, you'd be feeling really good about not raising as much back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Would have raised it a much better multiple. I mean, we were acquiring a company that had mostly Ukrainian employees. The war had just started. So our investors, we had to offer a very good valuation. And our assumption was, well, once we step in and we can reorganize, and we did do all the things. I mean, we grew the company 30% with basically no budget. We hired people all over the world. We, brought in pros in various roles, but now in the market, you go out there and they say like, well, it's not an AI product, which is basically what a lot of people are throwing money at. And even though the valuation's attractive, they're like, I'm getting my 5-6% leaving in a bank account, and no reason to go too high risk on.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts about fundraising? Should it be early? Should it be later? Should you maximize that in the first round because there might not be another? Or, what's your take on that?
I think so. I mean, I do think that it's always important to keep your, as much equity or as much, skin in the game as possible. But I do think that, it's that like bird in the hand kind of thing. It's like, if you have the opportunity and that money's there, you should probably take it and not overthink it too much. Like it's always good to have more cash, as long as it's not tied to what we were saying before. Like there are issues where, sometimes the incentives in this like VC game is, I'm going to give you this money and I expect you to burn it in 18 months. And then I expect you to raise more money and get to that next level. If it's that kind of situation, then it's a little bit more challenging, I think, because if you overraise and overcapitalize your company with the intention of burning all that money, you start just making really poor decisions and doing things that don't make any sense. Where if there is longer term incentives, we want to see this company, succeed. And there are examples. I have a friend of mine here in Barcelona. He sold his company a few years ago. They raised money from Sequoia. They did one round with Sequoia, and they ended up exiting to Zynga for like 300 million. And Sequoia was really happy. Like they only did one round. They never pushed them. They basically left them alone. They almost thought they were dead at one point. And it ended up being a pretty solid exit. Obviously for Sequoia, this was just a blip in the radar, but they made, solid money. But I think there's too few. It's just not optimized for those types of outcomes, the VC structure.
Being adaptable and you talked about it before. Open to change. Even changing people as you grow. Do you have specific strategies that you recommend for entrepreneurs to stay agile and flexible in their approach?
For me, it's so hard to create analogous situations to others that are founders. I do think, and I've talked to a lot of people, like I said, for them, the biggest challenge is that it's like, this person was loyal to me. This person helped us. This person got me, over the last 2 years to this level. But at some point, the company just outgrew them, or they're just not ready for that next level. I think, like I said, that always consider what you're building like a machine, and you're always trying to be a well-tuned machine, and always make sure that you are not the central piece of that machine is a key piece of anything, and that nobody's a central piece, that they are, replaceable in some sense, whether that's replacing them by moving them over to another section of the business or replacing them by removing them. I think that's always something that should be at top of mind. And I don't think it's discussed in certain circles, but I think oftentimes it's just about, hire the next VP or hire the next person that's a little bit higher. I think it's also just about following your gut. Like everyone I know that has fired people or that has, run companies, when it's over. Like, there's something inside you try and keep it going, but you should have just pulled the trigger. Everyone always says like, I should have done this when I first felt it. And it's true. Yeah. I fired someone this week that I should have fired a year ago. And I knew a year ago that I should have fired them, and I didn't. And I kept trying because there's also that feeling of they're dead. You also want to see people that are dedicated to the business and they want to be there. But sometimes you just know inside, and you're usually right.
Yeah. I do that exact same thing, is I don't do it fast enough. And it's always in retrospect. It's like, I knew 6 months ago and I should have done it then. And I didn't.
And everyone says that. And I wonder if it's like has there ever been people that we kept around? It's like, we were making a joke the other day because we work in HR. So there's the, I forget what it's called. Like when an employee gets put on a probation or on like a
performance improvement plan.
That never works. And I asked someone, has anyone ever come back from a performance improvement plan? And this lady told me yes. Like it was on our podcast, and she's like, yeah, we have people all the time. I was like, really? And I was like, why? And she's like, well, sometimes it's because the managers are just bad. Like the managers aren't communicating with their employees. And when HR steps in, I was like, okay. I was like, I would have never, I was like, if someone tells me you're not doing a good job, like the next step is HR's showing up and showing you the door.
Right. That makes sense though. If a leader is not leading, if the employee doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing or what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be measured, then that makes complete sense. And once they understand that, and make a connection, then now they know what they're supposed to do. They know what success looks like.
It is hard. Like it depends on the companies too. Like I've found for us, because like I said, a lot of people have been in the same company for most of their career. A lot of people don't know what great or good looks like. Like you just said,
Yes.
like what does good
you're
look
exactly
like?
right.
And whether it's because we're remote or like my own way of doing things, I like people that have like agency and ownership and kind of like push themselves a lot of times. And I find it difficult without bringing like external people in. Like oftentimes I've brought people in like externally and said like, hey, can you help me show our team sort of what is like a good, metrics dashboard look like, or how can they pull this all together? And they bring it in and they show it. But, I've seen that, the team still doesn't figure out how to actually execute it, and without you like kind of holding their hand through it. But I think the only way is really good hires, like installing people into the ranks that sort of bring that like, hey, this is what great looks like. This is what it should look like. And then that's when you really see like the people that gut feeling starts to show up. Like I brought this guy in, or this woman, and she's doing this and she's showing like what great looks like. And this person's clearly not getting it. And then your gut starts to like, okay, maybe they're not here for this. We need to find someone else.
Yeah. Well, you've had great success, multiple companies on your journey. What would you say to those who maybe doubt their ability to make a difference or leaving a lasting impact over time?
I would say it's always really hard. Like I still have like a lot of, just you feel like an imposter. You always have imposter syndrome,
Always.
no matter what.
Yes.
Always. One of the things I actually did during the pandemic, I didn't use Twitter ever before. And I started using Twitter to write things that I did because I felt like we had sold our company and I was like, I didn't do I didn't feel successful about it. I didn't feel like I really had learned anything along the journey. I was like, what did I get out of this? And so I started writing things that we did, even just weird things like experiences that we had. And you put it all together and you're like, wow, there's like a whole puzzle here. And there's something that you actually learned. Because then when you talk to people that haven't done it and they're at 0 and you're at, 2, you're like, oh, well, yeah, just because sometimes it's just like intuitive. You're like, well, this is how you do it. And they're like, well, why'd you do that? And you're like, I don't know. Like that's just what worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it always get that feeling that, there's always somebody that's going to be ahead of you and there's always someone that's going to be behind you. And you just kind of like pay attention to your own journey. And I think I said before, like just be curious and be resilient are the two things. Like if you don't think you're going to be able to sort of like handle those difficult moments, I wouldn't get into it. Like I think if you want, I think W-2 or employee work is totally a great outcome for people. And I think being an entrepreneur is oftentimes like a psychotic journey that people probably don't need to put themselves through. But I think that curiosity too is like one of the keys. You just have to want to like learn about different industries, different things, even just the minutia of the things that you're doing and be interested in, because that initial sort of excitement is going to wear off. That like, oh, we did it. We closed the deal or we got this partnership, or those highs are going to wear off. Those lows are going to wear off. And you always have to figure out a way to like kind of keep pushing yourself forward and just stay even keel inside of that. Like make sure that you don't ride those waves too hard. And I think a lot of people do ride them a little bit too hard, and that, it makes it so for them, that first step into being an entrepreneur, it's like, it's too hard for them because they get too emotional up and down. And the key is just another day. There's a good book called Chop Wood, Carry Water that I read that kind of just walks you. It's like, just keep doing the things day to day and enjoy them. Because when you get to that like exit or sort of whatever the end state is, you want to be able to look back and say like, oh, that was actually cool. I actually learned something, and take those learnings. But I think, some people get stuck in that first gear and they can't figure out how to get out of it. And just everyone's been there.
Yes. That's great, great advice. Well, where can people learn more about you and about Lanteria online?
So Lanteria, feel free to take a look at lanteria.com, lanteria.com. Me on LinkedIn, Andrew Swiler, Swiler, or on Twitter as well, Swilera. So Swiler A is my handle on Twitter, and that's pretty much all my footprint on the internet. I don't venture into Instagram or Facebook other than to look and see what like my mom is posting on there. But that's pretty much it.
Sounds good. We'll make sure and link all of that in the show notes. Andrew, it's been a great conversation. Thank you for being on SaaS Fuel.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be here.
Thanks again, Andrew, for coming on the show and sharing your journey and insights. It's a great company, fantastic solution, and solid info. I just love it. Well, you can learn more about Andrew at lanteria.net and connect with him on social as well. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And remember our YouTube channel, full episodes, shorts, SaaS training, 2 weekly videos with actionable tips and encouragement, and a few outtakes on there as well, because I mess up a lot and funny things happen when you film outside and in public places. But wherever you are, please subscribe and follow the show. And everyone who subscribes this week gets free access to AI Santa's Helper. Just input the interest of your loved ones and it generates the most thoughtful gift ideas. Just a little warning, may occasionally suggest a jetpack for your grandma. So we're still working out a few bugs there. Join us Thursday on our SaaS Fuel Expert Series, where my guest is virtual CMO and go-to-market builder Mark Donegan. We'll take a deeper dive into B2B SaaS marketing and what will work in 2024. I bet we could put that in our planning session. And next Tuesday, we have founder Adam Robinson, founder and CEO of retention.com. Adam's previous company sold for 8 figures to private equity, and retention.com has grown to 20 million ARR in under 3 years. Great insights next week. So I'll see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.